It's the Audible with Joshua Cole Allen, live on Bucs Report.
Welcome back to the Audible. I'm your host, Joshua Cole Allen. Thank you for making the right call here every Thursday night on Bucs Report on the Audible. We've got a great show for you tonight. We've got great guests, starting with Zach Goodall of Sports Illustrated Buccaneers. He's going to come down. We're going to talk about the draft. We're going to talk about schedule release, talk about some of these free agent re-signings and free agent signings they just did over the past few days. We've got a plethora of things to talk to about in the kickoff. We'll have Jacob Charnow, as always, with the halftime report coming in, breaking it down, talking about some sort of MVP quarterback who might want out, someone being the highest paid center, a couple other things going on around the league as well. And then we'll bring in back in Justin Melo of the Draft Network. If you were watching the Audible before, you saw how detailed and thorough Justin Melo was breaking down these potential Buccaneers. Well, now we know who they have. We know who they drafted. We know who they signed as undrafted free agents. So we're going to get down in there, break down these prospects. What's their best fits with the Buccaneers system? What's their strengths and weaknesses of their game, and how they can really make this Buccaneers team that much better than it already is. But as always, let's start the show with the kickoff. We'll jump right into that. Lots of stuff going on, starting with the draft. The draft happened this past weekend since I was last on, and we've got some new players on the team, so let's talk about them for a little bit. We have Joe Tryon, edge rusher out of Washington, with the first pick overall, number 32. Love this kid, athletic motor. He's got size, power. Guy looks like an action figure. If you haven't seen a picture of him, without a shirt on, the guy's ripped all the way up, muscles galore. He's going to come in here. He's going to be a rotational player, going to play some special teams, get to learn behind Shaq, JPP, Casey Rogers, Larry Foote, the defensive line and the outside linebackers coach. Going to be a great addition to this team. I think with a little bit of seasoning, he could be the next big thing. He's really has that. His ceiling is much higher than a lot of the other players in the draft. So excited to get him in. And then let's talk about the most polarizing pick in the draft. In round 2, they select quarterback Kyle Trask of Florida. I have been on the Kyle Trask bandwagon. If you watched the show, if you read my articles, if you heard me on any other shows, I've been telling you Kyle Trask is someone that they really, really liked. I've been hearing whispers from the organization saying they could take him as high as the second round. I didn't necessarily think they would take him that high. I had them more as a third-round guy, potentially trading up. But, hey, 64 was there. They took him, and we saw what happened. 3 picks, 3 out of the next 4 picks with Davis Mills and Kellen Mond going off the board to the Vikings and Texans, respectively. So, they took him at the right time. I think this guy, he's got all the tangibles and tools that you're kind of looking for. And a Bruce Arians quarterback. He's not a fluid runner. He's not a guy who's athletic, going to make plays with the ball out in space. But, when asked about that, Bruce Arians pretty much told you like it is, like he always does. He said, we draft quarterbacks to throw the ball, not to run the ball. That's what we got running backs for. So I'm not worried about that. And his game, I'm not comparing at all, but his game is more Tom Brady-esque than it would be a Cam Newton-esque. The two opposite ends of the spectrum there. He's more of a Tom Brady-esque quarterback, and he gets to learn behind Tom, but not just Tom. We're talking about Bruce Arians, a quarterback whisperer. We're talking about Tom Moore, who has years and years of NFL knowledge under his belt. We're talking about Clyde Christensen and Byron Leftwich. So he's got a lot of mentors to learn from. We had Reed Sinnett on the show last year, who was an undrafted free agent, and he talked about just being able to be in the same room as those guys and learn and pick their brains. Well, now, Kyle Trask has that opportunity, and he's in a situation where we know Brady's here for at least 1 more year, potentially 2, maybe 3. I mean, the guy is an Iron Man. You never know, when Father Time's going to catch up to him, and I know we're all hoping it's not anytime soon. But, now you have that person waiting in the wings potentially. And even if not, I mean, you look at when Tom Brady was younger, what the Patriots did with him, drafting, Matt Castle, albeit it was in the 7th round, but a guy like Ryan Mallett in the 3rd, a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo in the 2nd, Jacoby Brissett in the 3rd, Jared Stidham in the 4th. They always drafted quarterbacks in the draft to bring in and develop behind him. Even a guy like Brian Hoyer, who was an undrafted free agent, who went on to have a very I wouldn't say successful, but lucrative career. He got paid a lot at other places. So they were always in the business of bringing in quarterbacks and developing them, even though Tom Brady showed no signs of slowing down. In the worst case scenario, if Kyle Trask, doesn't pan out, maybe you can flip him, or, Brady decides he's going to play for 4 years instead of only 2 or 3. Maybe you can flip him for an asset. Maybe not the 2nd round pick you drafted him for, but you have a competent backup quarterback for 3 years, and then you flip him for a 3rd round pick or a 4th round pick. it's a good investment in my mind. You should always be developing quarterbacks, and that's something that the Buccaneers really haven't been doing the last couple of years with a guy like, Blaine Gabbert and obviously Ryan Griffin and his whopping 4 passes the last 6 years. So I think it's definitely great. But moving on from him, we'll go into Robert Hainsey. I know a lot of you guys are out there and pounding your fists on the table like Quinn Miners is still there, Wisconsin Whitewater, center guard. But they end up going Robert Hainsey from Notre Dame. He was a right tackle over there. If you look at the level of competition that, he played against, obviously, top defensive ends, top defensive linemen in the country. Not only that, you look at Notre Dame and the linemen that they pumped out, Quentin Nelson, Mike McGlinchey, the list goes, Zach Martin, the list goes on and on. There's some really high caliber, and they put another one out in Liam Eichenberg this year. So, Robert Hainsey, he played right tackle, but he might scoot into guard or center at the next level. He had 34 starts over his Notre Dame career at right tackle, but at the Senior Bowl, he was asked to play left guard, right guard, center. He kind of worked with trainers and taught himself how to snap a little bit, and he really impressed there. And I think that's part of the reason why the Buccaneers took him here, not just because of his interior, but his tackle versatility, but also because of the competition he played, right? If you look at a guy like Quinn Miners, who I know was a lot of our draft crushes, he played against D3 competition. So it's harder to get him in here and get him up to speed to playing. While he did well at the Senior Bowl, we had Robert Hainsey do it consistently over the 34 starts at Notre Dame. So, I love Quinn Miners, thought he was a Bruce Arians guy, thought he would be a great fit for Gilbert in this offensive line. But they went with Hainsey from Notre Dame. Not upset with it. Another pick, you thought Trask was a polarizing pick, but then they went out and not only got a wide receiver, but traded up for a wide receiver, Jalen Darden from North Texas. This kid, he looks pretty good. He's going to be able to be gunner and possibly return man in special teams. Only had one return in college, but it was for 81 yards, and it was electrifying. If you haven't watched the clip, I should have downloaded it to show it to you. Maybe next week we'll have that. But, man, watch that clip of him running back that 81-yard return. He's a guy who's got speed, 4.3, right? But he's not like Scotty Miller. Scotty Miller's got more of that straight line speed. This guy is more, he can play inside, he can play outside. I believe 19 of his touchdowns that he had over the past couple of years were actually from the slot. So he can play from the slot. He's very fluid, quick, good with the ball in his hands. He's got great run after the catch, rack, great yards after catch, yak. So and these are the things Jason Love was, talking about in his press conference. They really like his ability and what he can bring to the table. And for, a day 3 pick to grab a guy who you think can, be a return man for you and also a different dynamic weapon that you don't really have in the wide receiver room right now. Light has been doing great the last couple of drafts, so I'm not going to steer him wrong. And from all accounts, Tom Brady's excited to play with him, according to Arian. So if Tom Brady's excited about the pick, I'm excited about the pick. But Tom Brady's always probably excited about, wide receiver picks and more weapons to add to the offense. Then they shifted to the defense. They took defense in the first, sandwiched those next 2 picks with a quarterback, a tackle, and a wide receiver. And then they went back to defense, and they grabbed KJ Britt out of Auburn. A big physical, in-your-face tackle who's going to, hit you hard, put you in the ground. He's not very fluid, not very quick. Definitely needs to work on coverage, different things and abilities. But, this guy lays wood on you. He reminds me a bit of Ted Johnson, throwback linebacker that if you dropped him in 20 years ago, he could be a starter day 1. Now, in this new NFL where, everyone's faster, quicker, stronger, and there's a lot of maneuverability, he doesn't really have the quickest hips to follow backs and coverage. He's your typical downhill linebacker. Going to come in, hit you in the mouth, and when he's on the field, you're going to have to know where he is because he's going to lay the wood on you every single time. So, and he's going to play a lot of special teams for you if he makes the roster. We'll get onto that too next, coming up in a couple segments. I've got a list of stuff here. But, if he makes the roster, which is a big question because we'll get to the next pick after this one. Chris Wilcox, a cornerback in the 7th round, guy to BYU, a guy that I actually spoke with at his pro day. He had spoken with the Buccaneers numerous times. Another guy, 6'2", 4'3" speed, going to contribute as a gunner right away. He'll be in that battle for the 5th cornerback spot behind Ross Cockrell, SMB, Carlton Davis, and Jamel Dean, with guys like Herb Miller, a couple of these undrafted free agents that I'll get into, and also recent, as of today, another signing to that secondary. So he'll be battling those guys. We'll get into that. But then we'll go to the last position they took, and they doubled up on linebacker, inside linebacker to be specific. So they grabbed Grant Stewart out of Houston. This guy has an amazing story in the past. It's amazing to the point where he has become. It's very tragic, very sad. Father was in prison. Mom ended up being, addicted, and she had some troubles. I don't want to get too much into it. It's not my story to tell. But I mean, the young man has really, had to take care of his siblings, and he's really mature for one, and he's really grown into a really decent player. Where he was in Houston, versatility is off the charts there. He started at weak side linebacker. Then junior year, they asked him to play nickel safety. So he played nickel safety, led the team in tackles. Senior year, they're like, hey, we need to kick you to middle linebacker. So he moved over to middle linebacker, led the team in tackles again. The guy has just done it all, versatile, special teams maven, speed. He's got the big hair, which everyone loves. The funny story is, with these latter round picks, if your agents, sometimes your agents or the teams will send you boxes of hats. And we also heard the story Joe Tryon, a hat around. With Grant Stewart, his dad actually had a hat, right? He had one hat lying around, and it happened to be Tampa Bay Buccaneers Bucco Bruce hat. So it was pretty cool when that story came out. I really I think this kid could definitely he could definitely be a contributor on special teams for sure. I definitely think that give me 1 second. Definitely think that he could be a solid contributor for this franchise on special teams for sure. So they weren't done though after that. They also added a few undrafted free agents. TJ Simmons, wide receiver from West Virginia. They added another kicker, Jose Borregales from Miami. He was actually the top kicker in the country. Cornerback Cameron Kinley from Navy. Tackle Calvin Ashley from FAMU. They added safety Lawrence White from Iowa State. Defensive lineman Elijah Ponder from Cincinnati. Outside linebacker Leighton McCarthy from Florida Atlantic University. Offensive lineman Cedarius Hutchinson from South Carolina, and safety Augie Contresta from Stony Brook. The guy I'm most excited about is Cedarius Hutchins. A guy who can play inside, outside, he's got versatility, play guard, center. He's an offensive lineman who's going to come in. He's a big dude. I think that he's got the best chance of potentially winning a spot on this roster out of the undrafted free agents they brought in, battling John Molchin for that last spot. So we'll see how it goes. It's going to be interesting, to see how these training camp battles all shake out, because they weren't done after the draft. They also, went out and signed a bunch of free agents too, and we'll talk about that with our guest who's coming on in a minute. They went out yesterday. They signed safety Raven Green from formerly of the Green Bay Packers, played 20 games there. He had I think 2 starts with the team. And then they also signed linebacker Joe Jones from formerly of Denver. Special teams guys, both of them. Green has a lot of speed. Jones, he's a guy who can, he plays some starts on defense, some spot rotational work on defense, mostly special teams. Led the team in special teams. Led the team in special teams. Say that 5 times fast. Led the team in special teams with tackles over the last 4 years. So he's a special teams player through and through. And then today they signed cornerback Nate Brooks. I talked about that cornerback competition with them bringing in Wilcox and then signing Cameron Kinley from Navy to compete with a guy like Herb Miller and a guy like Chris Wilcox. All those 4 guys are probably competing. And, who knows? They still have 5 open roster spots too. So they could end up bringing somebody else in. But they also picked up today on waivers outside linebacker, defensive end Ladarius Hamilton off the Cowboys. So they brought in a lot of players in. There's still room for more. Like I said, the roster's at 85 of the 90-man roster this offseason. So they still have room to bring in 5 players now. We'll get into rookie mini camp's going to be on May 14th to the 15th. We'll get into OTAs and stuff like that a little bit later in the show, because I've got some more stuff I didn't get to. Our guest is here. But, you never know who they're going to bring in for tryouts during mini camp. Some of these guys might stick. They might look at veterans. They might – AB is still not on the books yet. You still got to sign these draft picks. So there could still be an opportunity for them to restructure or extend a guy like Jensen, a guy like JPP, or a guy like Golston. Maybe look to cut somebody. They already restructured Cam Brate. Maybe they extend Godwin. Maybe they extend OJ Howard. I doubt it without seeing a full healthy season. But they might be able to go out and add more players as well. I know someone in the comments is saying Gerald McCoy. I think that ship has sailed with Gerald McCoy. And we'll get our guest in here right now and ask him his opinion on Gerald McCoy. But one last thing I wanted to touch on was with Trask, they had re-signed Griffin as well. But now they went out the other day and they brought in Blaine Gabbert back. So now not only do they have Brady, they have Gabbert, they have Trask, and they have Griffin. I don't know about you, but I think the writing is on the wall for Griff. They brought him back to a very minimal deal while Gabbert signed a 1 year, $2 million deal with up to $500,000 incentives. You're not going to cut your second round pick. And, Brady is on the chopping block, though. So we'll see. I'm just kidding. But with that being said, we're going to go from the kickoff up to the press box. We're going to bring Zach Goodall in from SI Buccaneers. I see him all the time in Fred McGriff. I see him all the time in the press conference with me. It's going to be a pleasure to finally talk to him for once. So let's bring him in here. Zach, how are we doing today?
Doing great, Joshua. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. So let's start first where it all, finished up. This offseason began with a Super Bowl championship. What were your thoughts? And by the way, love the Boston hat.
Thank you.
What were your thoughts, going into the playoffs and after they're 7-5 at the bye week? What were your thoughts, coming out of that bye week and then making that run with them eventually winning the Super Bowl?
So I had just joined the Buccaneers beat, right? I'm a pretty young sports reporter myself. I was covering Florida for Sports Illustrated. And I'm sure you know Luke Easterling. He's on the beat as well. He's on these press conferences with us. He was running the Buccaneers site for Sports Illustrated until August, something around then. And they didn't have someone for the first 2 or so months of the Tom Brady era of actually playing games. They had him during free agency and all that, but not for games. They needed someone covering him. So about halfway through the season, probably right after the Florida-Georgia game, I transitioned to start covering both teams. And I just started learning about the Bucs from there. Like, I obviously had a lot of background understanding the team and being an NFL fan myself. I used to cover the Jaguars, so I've got NFL experience. I knew what I was getting into covering the Bucs, but I still had a lot of ins and outs, small details, schematic things, tendencies that I had to learn. So I come in right at that point, right when it's getting close to the bye week. Tampa Bay's not playing that well. They were struggling against some faster-paced, quick, rhythmic offenses like Kansas City and Los Angeles at that one point. In Tom Brady, he was having issues throwing the deep ball as well. So naturally, like, my very first thought when I get here is, I don't know what to make of this. Bruce Arians is always known for a vertically based offense. Tom Brady can't throw a deep ball, and the defense can't protect a slant route on RPO. So I didn't know what was going on. And I looked at that bye week as such a crucial point for this team. It was also a great time for me to catch my breath covering two teams. But it was such a huge point for them to just, come together. They've said it throughout the offseason that they really, they didn't have the offseason, traditionally speaking, like they had in normal years due to COVID. There was so much adjustment being made to getting used to Tom Brady throwing balls compared to Jameis Winston. New guys, when it's all said and done, two impactful rookies taking on big roles as rookies, and they didn't even have a traditional offseason. Like, it was going to take a lot of time for the Bucs to get used to everything. They had a really light bye week as well, which didn't help. And with that all coming together, I just didn't come in at the right time to make an accurate assessment as to how good the team was. So from that point on, after the bye week, it just turned into a different team. It was a dominant team. It was one of the better teams that I've watched, even just in a short stretch of time. But in my time covering sports, like, I've not seen a team come in and play as consistently on both sides of the ball, as disruptive with their pass rush, as, Brady could connect on almost any pass he wanted. I hadn't really seen a team come together that quickly in my time covering football. And it was excellent. It was amazing football. And as Tampa Bay fans understand now, it was surely a great time for the city. And it was a really impressive championship run when it was all said and done.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the lateness of that bye week, which it was the double entendre because it kind of hurt the team, but it helped the team at the same time. You know, you go 13 weeks straight playing, your body's banged up, and it really doesn't give you any time to self-scout yourselves. And we heard the players at, during the Super Bowl press conference saying, they had time to heal up. And Aaron's giving them that first whole week off. And, these players are professionals and, they're not taking the time off. They're actually going in, watching film, looking at their technique, seeing what they're doing wrong. And, when they get back to practice the next week to prepare for, I believe it was the Minnesota Vikings out of the bye, you saw a different team. You saw a more comfortable team. You saw a team that really started to gel together because that was the thing, too. These guys weren't even allowed to sit with each other at lunch or anything like that because the social distance protocols are crazy. So you saw that bond really come together and the team really click and start firing on all cylinders from, the Minnesota game. They've had their struggles here and there. But you saw them progressively get better, and once everyone was back and you had Vita Vea in that mix, it culminated to a Super Bowl championship that was just, incredible to watch and, making history, first team to ever do it in your home stadium. It was just an amazing run for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. And obviously, I'm in my first year here, too. It's almost been a year, guys. I think actually my anniversary will be next Thursday, so we'll have an anniversary show for me 1 year at the Audible. But, from that, then we go into free agency and everyone's like, oh, how are they going to afford to bring everybody back? How can they bring everybody back? Who's going to leave? Who's going to leave? And it doesn't happen. Not only does everyone come back, they also re-sign all their top starters, but all their key depth. We're talking Blaine Gabbert, Ross Cockrell, Steve McClendon, Nacho, Wells, Stinney. They bring all these guys back and then top it off. They're like, let's put Antonio Brown on the cherry on top and bring him back too. Were you just as mind-boggled, I think, as some of these fans and as a reporter for the team as well? Like, man, they are just doing some wizardry with the cap.
Yes and no. I've been used to, especially in this era of covering football, I got into it at the right time to watch cap manipulations. I've seen teams like the Saints. I was, like I said, covering the Jaguars before, so I've seen them, strategically figure out how to load up deals in a certain way to maneuver the cap, set themselves up for certain years, set up years where they might be a little bit tight or they might need to make some cuts, but they understand that that's probably outside of the window of contention. And that's what Tampa Bay is doing now, is that they have a ultimate window of contention that might be another 2 years. Like, that's actually pretty long by all standards. It's usually like you got a 1 year, maybe 2 year window. Well, they just won a Super Bowl, and I think everyone could see Tom Brady coming back for 2 years. The consensus thought is one more, and we'll see from there. I think Tom Brady's competitive enough to come back for 2 years, and I think that they could keep the core of this roster together for 2 years if they really wanted to. They might lose another player or two next year, but that's just ultimately what happens. It's so rare for a team to come back after – well, no, not even rare. It doesn't happen for a team to come back after a Super Bowl and have all 22 starters return. So naturally, they could lose one or two more guys next year, but ultimately there's ways to maneuver the cap. There's ways to push money down the line, as we've seen with the voidable years that they did this year. There's ways that you can structure a contract with a heavy signing bonus to have a low cap hit year one, and that hit gets bigger over time. There's different ways that you can do it to go about creating more cap space. Tampa Bay really hadn't done that in recent years. They had just been pretty sturdy with average, salaries, and it kind of sticks that way throughout the course of a contract. And now they're at that point where they're not only a winning team, but even though the money wasn't super, super loose this year, they had the flexibility to move these deals around, restructure, to push deals with voidable years into the future, to keep a team around and pretty easily contend for another championship this year. So I definitely tip my cap to Jason Light for being able to do that, but it wasn't something that completely blew my mind just because we've seen teams start to do this in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Saints, they put themselves in kind of cap hell over there, trying to push things around and not being able to save. But the way they did it, I thought was smart. They extended it, but they were in a unique position where they were going into next season with the third most cap space in the league, on paper. So when they re-signed these guys and being able to push money around, they weren't really committed that much salary next year. And then to be able to sign these back and move the money around, I thought it was extremely smart the way they did it.
And that's what's great about the 1 year deals too, is like their hits are obviously they fluctuate and their bonuses and everything that goes into it too. But next year they're not like all those guys are free agents again. They can bring them back on much more flexible prices if they want to, if a guy earns it. But it was
Exactly.
wizardry. It definitely
Exactly.
was wizardry.
The one thing that they did do too is, with the bonuses, they're not likely to be earned incentives, but like just on that line. So that's one thing to watch because those could get pushed into next year's salary cap when they do have guys like Whitehead, Rojo, Fournette, all these guys that they re-sign, but they also have Kappa, they also have Jensen. They have a lot of players who are on 1-year deals. I mean, OJ Howard and now Cam Brate's on a year-to-year deal with team options. I mean, he had no guaranteed money, so it was a team option either way. But now it's kind of like, how do you continue to build this team and reconstruct this team each year after this year? But I want to get into the draft too, because that's another way to add talent, and I think they did just that. Obviously, Joe Tryon I really like as a player, but the most polarizing pick I think was Kyle Trask. You actually covered Florida, right? So you know a little bit more about this kid. Why don't you talk to people about Kyle Trask and what you saw covering him, and then let's get into a little bit more of the draft classes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate to cover Kyle for the past 2 years, and it's been, just as unique a story as anyone that's researched him in the past week or so has found out. I mean, the dude was a 2-star quarterback coming out of college in Manville, Texas, and I've talked to his coach. He said it. He realizes that it probably was a mistake when it was all said and done, but he had 2 great quarterbacks in De'Ara King, who's at Miami now and is going to be a draft prospect next year, and Trask. He just went with who impressed him most in practice. King transferred in from a different school. He fit the type of offense they were trying to run, and Trask as a whole, he became the backup. It's just how it is. Trask wasn't the type to want to go transfer, or same thing in Florida when he was a backup for a couple of years. He wasn't the type to look for a transfer, find the easy way out. And I think that that's something that the Buccaneers really liked. I mean, whether Tom's around for 1 more year or 2 more years, you would have guys that might be pushing to come in and play as a rookie or as a young guy and have that itch, which is great. We all admire competitive drive, but no one's coming in and taking Tom Brady's job. It's just not going to happen. It's not even going to happen if he's struggling. There's no pressure that could ever lead to Tom Brady being pulled, right? And I don't think that Kyle Trask will ever contribute to that type of pressure. He's the ultimate sit back and learn type of guy because he's done it before. He's never made a peep. And when it's his time to come in and shine, he's done a pretty good job of it. I've gotten to watch him grow as a quarterback as well as a guy with a media presence. He's never been the most outspoken guy. He's kind of a shy guy. I joked with someone, honestly, that on his Buccaneers call, he was obviously elated, very confident being a second-round pick. But that was the most I feel like I had ever heard him talk with the media. He was very jubilant. He was excited, and he was excited when he spoke with us in Florida. But it was always, this isn't about me. This is about my team. This is about my coaches. Very PR, coach-spoken type of guy. And I was really excited to see the Buccaneers take him because I'm excited to continue covering him and continuing to see him grow like I did over the past 2 years at Florida.
Yeah, I was one guy. I heard a lot of whispers from the organization saying they really liked him, and I had him in like 4 or 5 of my mocks going into the third, sometimes slipping into the fourth, and never had him in the second round because just reading up and watching him, I thought that he was a guy who could slip into the early fourth and they take him at 95, or if they needed to maneuver the board with not needing to bring all 8 picks in and move up a little bit in the third to grab him if they needed to. But they sat there and they grabbed him at 64, which obviously was the right call. You saw Kellen Davis Davis Mills and Kellen Mond go right back, right after those in the next 3 picks. So I think they made the right call there. And like I said before, prior to you hopped on, I think it's always smart to be developing quarterbacks, bringing them in. Even when, Tom Brady was with the Patriots, they still did that, brought quarterbacks in high round, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth round, seventh round picks, bringing them in, trying to develop them. And they actually got good value for some of them. Jimmy G went for a second. Matt Castle went for a second. You look at Jacoby Brissett went for Philip Dorsett, who actually ended up being a huge part of their Super Bowl run that year, a key contributor. So I think it's always good to be in the process of developing quarterbacks. But another another position that they need to develop and almost is just as important now, I feel like, in today's NFL, is a guy getting after the quarterback. And that's what they did in the first round with Joe Tryon out of Washington. I really like this guy. I think the ceiling is through the roof. He's a little bit raw, only 1 year production, only 1 year as a starter. And there's some definite things he needs to work on, but out of the box, man, the strength, the explosiveness that you can see this guy really impressed me. What were your thoughts on him when they took him on day one? Do you think it was a good pick? Do you think they should have traded down, or was someone else on the board that you liked better? What were your thoughts on that pick?
Yeah, I agree with you. I was a big fan of the pick, and you mentioned it with the run on quarterbacks right after Tampa Bay took Trask. There was a run on edge rushers right before Tampa Bay took Tryon. I think there like 3 of the past 4 picks right before they were up were edge rushers. 5 or 6 going up to 21 when Kwity Paye went to Indianapolis. So there was several pick positions, in my opinion, that Tampa Bay needed to address with that future need, that luxury type of selection. And edge rusher was right up there. Jason Pierre-Paul, he's another one of those 1 year left guys. 32, very productive, but he's at a position where, guys traditionally aren't playing much beyond 34, 35 without really starting to slow down. And you just put a ton of money in Shaquille Barrett to play the opposite side at the same position. You aren't going to want to keep putting a ton of money into that spot, especially as Pierre-Paul gets older, making edge rusher truly one of the team's biggest future needs. In Tryon, you take advantage of that run on edge rushers before it starts to dry up. You get a guy that's he's got an elite physical profile. I mean, he looks the type, right? At 6'5", 259. He's a guy that he moves extremely well for his size. You mentioned it, explosion and power. It's raw, but you see that get off when everything's going right. It just boom, right off the snap. He's that type of edge rusher that can make that type of instant impact just because of his explosiveness off the line. You want to see him refine his technique. You want to see him add more moves to his pass rushing arsenal besides the bull rush, which we've seen him win with a lot. He's just got so much raw power right at the point of attack where you can win with that bull rush. You want to see him add more over time, but that's exactly why you take this type of pick. He looks the type. He can be the type with his athletic profile. He's got production. When he did take the field, he was productive as an edge rusher, so it's not like Jason Oweh from Penn State where he had 0 sacks this past year, even though he's an athlete. You've at least got something to hang your hat on with Tryon. And I can't really think of a better situation. We say it with quarterback. Not many better spots than to go back up Tom Brady for a few years and learn from him. You could say the same thing at edge rusher. When you've got Shaquille Barrett, Jason Pierre-Paul, no better place for a high upside guy like Joe Tryon to go and learn from other than behind those 2 guys.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with you there. And, you talk about it, his ability to get off the ball. And, he does show some wasted movements that slows him down a couple. But, he actually opted out last year. You don't know what he's been working on. Hopefully he comes in prepared, ready to go. I'm excited to see this kid and what he can do. In the 3rd round, they took a versatile offensive lineman, Robert Hainsey from Notre Dame. I don't know about you. One of my draft crushes was Quinn Miners. He was still on the board. I'm like, no. But after going back and looking at Robert Hainsey's film and reading the scouting reports and looking at everything, because he kind of was off my radar because we had a chance to speak with him at Notre Dame, and he's like, I didn't really talk to the Bucs other than the Senior Bowl, so I was like, when they're showing interest in a bunch of these other guys, so I was like, So I kind of took him off my radar, but versatile, play right tackle, left guard, right guard, center. What were your thoughts on that pick when it came in? Were you expecting an offensive lineman there?
I was expecting an offensive lineman at some point. And I guess, we've talked about Trask. From my perspective, I do love the Trask pick, but I did feel like that number 64 pick could have been used on whether it was a corner or an offensive lineman. That was one of the positions, especially on the interior, that I thought was another one of those major future needs. Should be addressed before too long. I personally had cornerback maybe higher than other people did, but that was one of those positions as well. But to take one in the 3rd round, that did seem like a good sweet spot, or at least day 2 at some point. And Hainsey seems like a surefire type of guy. He's a projection in the sense that he's never played guard or center in actual games, just the Senior Bowl. But he's coming from Notre Dame. He's probably one of the most well-coached offensive linemen in this draft. solely because he came from Notre Dame. So if you want a guy that understands technique as an offensive lineman, he's your guy. And I think that raises his ceiling with Tampa Bay. And if he's just going to be a depth piece, a third round depth offensive lineman isn't the worst use of draft capital in the world, even if he never really emerges as a full-time starter. If you get a good backup out of the late third round for an offensive lineman, I still feel like that's a good pick. So I understand taking the risk on a guy like that, moving him inside. You're encouraged, certainly, based off what he was able to do at the Senior Bowl. And you also see he doesn't have the most length. He's not the most agile guy to be playing on an island. It's understandable why his strengths suggest he should move to guard and why they see that upside. And if he turns into a starter, then great. Like, that's a slam dunk, A+ type of pick, especially with your coaching proving they can handle that type of a projection player and turning him into a success story. And I think he's got that potential with Tampa Bay. And at worst, if he ends up just becoming a solid backup who moved to the interior, you still have to view that, I think, as a win.
Yeah, I mean, and the rest of the draft, day 4 was pretty much used on special teams. They grabbed wide receiver Jalen Darden from North Texas, who could be a return man. They grabbed Chris Wilcox, corner out of BYU, KJ Britt, linebacker of Auburn, and then they also grabbed Grant Stewart, linebacker out of Houston. Something that Bruce Arians, stressed that he wanted was speed, special teams, size, and he got all of that on day 3. I want to move over to the schedule real quick because the schedule comes out on the 12th. And, we're going to see who the Buccaneers open up against. We know that extra game is coming against the Colts in Indianapolis, but we'll see where it lines up, how bye weeks are going to work, if they're still going to have early week 4 bye weeks like they normally have. And we'll get into this with Jacob Charnow a little bit as well. But with the schedule currently as based, I know based on roster, they have the easiest. Based on strength schedule, they have the 4th easiest. Where do you see this Tampa Bay team finishing up at the end of the regular season in the wins column?
No one's asked me this.
No injuries.
So I guess that's a good question. I could see 11 to 12. I think they're very easily one of, if not the most talented returning roster. The biggest thing for them as well is the chemistry that they've got, right? Again, when has this ever happened that a Super Bowl team returns all 22 of their starters? That's even with an offseason and really a second offseason in a row where things are not set in stone like they usually are. Things are still up in the air. It's not as comfortable as it usually is. This chemistry that they have, this momentum they have coming off of a Super Bowl, on top of just the general talent on the roster, that is a huge plus. And that could lead to a really great start out of the gate. We saw that there was a good start last year, and then there was some up and down. We could see Tampa Bay getting off to a really great start this year because of that. Maybe it catches people by surprise. Maybe it doesn't. And maybe I'm wrong here in my prediction, but I could see them coming out 0-5-1, 6-1, and starting off the season really strong, maybe dropping a couple games as it goes on. But give me 11 wins for the season right now. I'm curious to see how things go in camp, and I can't wait to get down there, but give me 11 for now.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to get down there and, hopefully get some one-on-one with the players. Last question, then we'll get you out of here. The slogan is "Go for 2." Is that a possibility? Do you think they can do it?
I guess so. I mean, especially based off what I was saying before, if it's as strong as a roster that could come out and especially make a statement that early, then who am I to say that they couldn't?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fun season to watch for sure. Zach, I want to thank you so much for coming in here. We'll definitely have you back on here. I'll be seeing you, I'm sure, in these press conferences and hopefully in person sooner rather than later. But again, thank you. Why don't you give a second to promote what you're doing, where they can find you, and everything like that.
Absolutely. This is a great time. I'm looking forward to coming back. Everyone can find me on Twitter at Zach_Goodall. Follow my work there as well as at SI Buccaneers. We're bringing content over at allbucks.com just about every day.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll get you out of here. Have a great night. Thanks for being a guest.
Thank you.
So there we go. We got Zach Goodall. We're going to switch and switch right into it with a halftime with my man, the prodigy of Hard Count Football Podcast, Jacob Charnow. Jacob, how are you doing today? Got stuck in a little bit of traffic, but you are here, and I'm excited to have you here. What's been going around the NFL? I know there's been one quarterback there's a little bit of news going on about him. Why don't you tell us what's going on, my man?
Yeah, I did get caught in a little bit of traffic. I mean, New Jersey traffic isn't extreme, but it'll certainly hold you back 5 or 10 minutes. So that's where I was. But I'm happy to be here, Josh. Thanks for having me on as always. And yes, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, if doesn't it feel, Josh, you can hopefully you can back me up on this. It feels like every single year Aaron Rodgers is disgruntled with the Packers, right? Doesn't it feel like every single year there's something going on with him? And
pretty much.
always doing him dirty.
But some of these years he does have points. I will say that.
I think this year he definitely has a point. I think, this, I think actually, no, I'll say this. I think last year he had more of a point than he does this year. This doesn't, what was interesting about this Aaron Rodgers situation, we heard, oh, it was a contract thing. Oh, he's mad they don't have weapons. Oh, he wants the GM fired. Oh, this, that. And then today, Mr. Adam Schefter reports that, oh, he goes on the Dan Patrick show and oh, yeah, what I really meant was it was a build-up of events and this and that, and it just happened to come out on draft day. That, take it for what you will, but it sounds like it was a little bit placed during that time. I don't know how, because none of this news came out of Aaron Rodgers' camp, right? Schefter can't confirm that that Rodgers was calling Brian Gutekunst, their GM, Jerry Krause in group chats and stuff like that. But according to Adam Schefter, and I think I can quote this, is I believe that Aaron Rodgers might want out of Green Bay, which, come on, right, Josh? Really?
Pretty vague there.
That's very vague.
I think you're right. I think it has a combination of a multitude of things. Obviously, the weapons, obviously the call with Matt LaFleur going for the field goal, and then the contract. Obviously, them drafting Jordan Love. He's an older player, right? If you're an older player, you want a contract. You want a contract with term, and you obviously money because he deserves it. He's former MVP. So you want all those things, and he's not going to get that in Green Bay because they can only give him a 2-year extension. You have to get Jordan Love on the field at some point before his 5th-year option kicks in. And if you don't do that, and you already burned 1 year, you essentially got 2 more years left of Aaron Rodgers before you need to see what this kid can do. Because if I'm Jordan Love, and I've said this a multitude of times, that if I'm Jordan Love and my 5th-year option comes around and they decline it, I'm not coming back to Green Bay after my fourth year of my contract expires. I'm going somewhere else. You guys sat me on the bench for 5 years. Yeah, I learned from Aaron Rodgers, but I want to go play football.
Is he really learned? It doesn't seem like Aaron Rodgers would be the kind of guy.
He seems like a Brett Favre type of teacher.
Yeah. He doesn't seem like the teacher kind of guy to teach a young.
But we'll see. I mean, he wants to go to the AFC, and they're not going to trade him in the NFC. So I'm all for it. Better, easier competition for the Buccaneers. Although it is tougher competition for the Patriots, but who knows if they're even ready to compete. But get them out of the NFC for the Bucs. Let's go. Get them out of there.
Yeah.
Super easy. Guys, let's see more action in the comments too, please. Come on. Let's get it going. We're going to have Justin Melo in here. We're going to break down all your draft questions. And don't worry, Jacob. I will leave you in here so you can ask him about your draft. But what else is going on around the NFL? Let's shoot real quick. Rapid fire. What's going on?
The schedule is coming out soon. In less than a week, May 12th, we got the schedule coming out. We'll find out who the Bucs. When we know who the Bucs play, we'll find out when they play. We'll find out who they will open against, because I think, if I'm correct, they will be playing on that Thursday night game. Or at least there's a real chance that they do. Man, how cool would that be if they play against the Patriots in week 1? Because they do play them. That would be interesting. That would definitely be interesting. But yeah, other than that, the right tackle for the Broncos, Juwan James, he tore his Achilles. He is out for the year, unfortunately. But the main story from this is that it was something with his contract. Josh, you might know a little bit more about it than I do, but can you explain a little bit about what happened with this Juwan James contract because he tore his Achilles?
Yeah, so pretty much with Juwan James is he was working out off facility, right? And he got injured off facility. Now we know teams are, the NFLPA is encouraging players to boycott all voluntary work. Well, when you get injured off the facility, it's not a violation of your contract, but your guaranteed money becomes at risk because it becomes a non-football injury instead of a football injury. If you injure yourself working out of the facility, it's covered under your guarantee. Non-football injury off of your facility, out of the facility, it's not covered. So the big stink is, are the Denver Broncos going to pay him this money, even though he was out to state? He was jet skiing or playing basketball. I was working out with a trainer towards Achilles. Stuff happens. So they're talking about putting him on the NFI list, non-football injury, and that way they wouldn't have to pay his salary for this year. So it's been a big thing about players and about the NFLPA.
What I find interesting, this kind of reminds me of, do you remember the Yoenis Cespedes situation from a few years ago where he, I think it was with the Mets, if I'm correct, he like was riding a horse or something and he broke both his legs and like, they didn't, and then like, that was like the end of his career or something. Like he's so irrelevant now, but he was like this huge star and then he had this horse incident, but then the horse, like in his contract, they were very specific. They were like, you cannot ride horses. And then he rode a horse. You're like, what? Like, what a weird, like that doesn't happen to anybody else. And Cespedes, and then he just like stopped showing up. You remember he stopped showing up to practice and stuff and he missed a game. And like no one could find him for like 2 or 3 days. It was what a weird guy. But poor Juwan, man. Juwan James, I've seen a lot of players reacting to it. Patrick Mahomes, Le'Veon Bell. Those are 2 big names that have reacted and are like, yo, like, that's BS. So what's going on with Juwan James? Like, pay the man. You can't be doing this. That's ridiculous. He's
such a bad precedent, Such a bad precedent. So we'll see what happens with that.
$20 million.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. So what else has been going on around the NFL? Man,
the draft happened. Well, I'm sure we'll talk draft with Justin Melo in just a second, but that there is a ton that happened with the draft. While we're here, I mean, the Bucs had a great draft. Joe Tryon on the first round. Josh, me and you were talking about Joe Tryon like a ton for the last couple of weeks, and then they did draft him. They didn't get your boy Avery Williams, but we'll let that be that.
Avery Williams. I mean,
some of my favorite drafts. I'll list off real quick. I loved the Jets draft. I'll ask Justin Melo about that one. That'll be my literal only question for him. The Lions. I think the Lions had a great draft. I think the Browns had a great draft. Browns had a great draft, and I think the Panthers had a great draft.
I love the Panthers draft, unfortunately.
And I think the Dolphins had a pretty solid draft.
I mean, 4 picks in the top 50 something. I mean, how do you screw that up?
Hard to screw that up.
But hey, you mentioned the man, right? So let's bring him in here. We're going to go inside the huddle because literally that's where this guy has been talking to these players, interviewing them. I think he put out 250 article interviews of all these players who are in the draft. So let's bring him in here. We can ask him your draft question. Hey, Jason. How are you doing?
How's it going, guys?
Good. Getting a little back from.
Let me see here.
Do you have headphones or something?
I don't.
All right, I'll ask the question. I'll pause and then you answer. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm a New York. And I really look forward to the draft because everything. We got Robert Saleh. We got our GM. Talk a little bit about the draft. What is your favorite pick from this Jets?
Yeah, I thought they had a really good draft. Obviously getting their quarterback at number 2 was the most important thing for them, and we knew they were going in that direction there with Zach Wilson. But coming back, I think, and getting Elijah Moore was my favorite pick that they made. It was probably one of the better picks in the draft. I was incredibly high on Elijah coming out and really like the skill set there. And I think I like the way they've set up, the future. They can't make the same mistake they made with Sam, right? They got to surround him with weapons. They got to make sure that they set him up for success. And Elijah is going to be that kind of weapon for Zach Wilson. So I really, really like that pick.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. He wasn't the guy I thought you were going to get. And I guess the Giants take Tony and going with a shot. But yeah, that's all I need. One more reassurance that the Jets are going to be really.
Yeah, I mean, I like the direction they're going in for sure. Coach Salah was a great hire, I thought. And the offensive coordinator they brought with him, right, Baby LaFleur, right? I really like the offense that he's going to set up there. So I think they got the right coaching staff, and it's going to come down to the quarterback. Let's be honest. If Zach Wilson was the right pick, then they're going to prosper, and if he wasn't, then it's going to be a bit of a struggle.
I really hope they do something. I really hope they do something good here. It's I need it. But Josh, I'm gonna get out of here because I'm gonna let you do your interview with Justin. He's a super knowledgeable guy, man. He's from what I've heard and what I've seen, he puts
He's
the
the
work in. I
best.
mean, what, 250 articles or whatever. Like I struggled getting through my round 2 draft prospects, and he's getting through 7 rounds of them.
Yeah, he put out his big boards and everything like that. It was just absolutely amazing. But Jacob, I want to thank you always for coming in here, breaking down halftime, and we'll see you later, my man.
Appreciate it, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, back with me and Justin here live, and we're going to get into it, what you guys want. Make sure you drop some questions down there for him if you want in the comments. But let's get right into it. Talk to me about Joe Tryon, the Bucs' #1 overall draft pick at number 32.
Yeah, and that was one that I got right. If you had read my mock draft, my last one that I had on the Draft Network just a couple days before the draft, I had Tryon at 32 to Tampa. So it was nice to see that I got that one correct, especially on the back end, where it gets a little tougher to predict. But I really like Joe Tryon. I think I spoke about him last time I did this show. A guy that I think is very flexible and can do a lot of things for a defense. I think he's got obviously the skills to rush the passer. We saw that in 2019, the last time he was on the field. The ability to stop the run. I think he can drop in coverage a little bit. And he was really well coached, at the University of Washington. All those guys were. There's a reason that defense sent a bunch of guys to the league in this draft. You had Levi Onwuzurike, you had Keith Taylor, you had Elijah Molden. A lot of great picks coming out of that school in this class. And Tryon's a guy, I really like the landing spot too, I should say, because obviously Tampa being this, the reigning champions, and they brought everybody back, right? The whole team is back. So there's not a lot of room for these year 1 rookies to contribute immediately. But Tryon's the kind of guy where I think they'll ease him in. He's going to play behind some good players, but he's ready to play a limited role, and they're going to rotate him in there. He'll be part of on that D-line, and really excited about the landing spot for him, and I think Tampa made a great choice there.
Yeah, I really loved the Joe Tryon pick. He was actually in my last mock too. I had him going there. I also had their next pick in my last mock, but not the right position. I had him going in the 3rd round. They ended up taking him in the 2nd round at number 64 overall. But Kyle Trask, quarterback out of Florida, some people thought it was a little early for him. Some people thought it was late, depending on where you had him graded. But then you see the next quarterbacks with Davis Mills and Kellen Mond go off the board, all within a 4-pick range. And you're like, okay, maybe they got the guy they wanted. Maybe that range wasn't too far off. What were your thoughts on the Trask pick, his development behind time with coaching staff, what his ultimate ceiling could be?
Yeah, I think they took him right where they needed to, and fans don't always realize that NFL teams are really good at knowing where someone's going to get drafted. I mean, you saw the run on quarterbacks there in that round, so they took him when they needed to. So with Trask, this is a kid who really impressed, the University of Florida this past season. I mean, no one had a better seat, right? A closer front row seat than Tampa Bay did, right? To what he did at Florida this past year. It's a guy that waited 7 years to start, which is really tremendous. The adversity that he battled through. He was supposed to start in high school. And then De'Aaron King, a big-time quarterback, ends up transferring in there and ends up taking his spot. So he waits 7 years to start. What does he do? He doesn't pout about it. He doesn't cry. He made the most of the opportunity. He led the nation in touchdown passes this past year. I really like the landing spot for him. I think for him to go there and obviously to sit behind the greatest quarterback of all time. And I believe they brought Blaine Gabbert back. I think Blaine Gabbert's an excellent teammate. We had him in Tennessee for a little bit as well, so I know him well. Everyone speaks very highly of Blaine Gabbert in the league. So it's a good landing spot for Kyle to go in and learn from these guys and take advantage. He played in a spread West Coast offense there at Florida that he mastered. That's the one question that I have. I think it's a great landing spot for him to learn behind these guys, but is it the right landing spot for Tampa, on the flip side of that? Because I don't know that he's a great fit for what they do offensively right now with their vertical passing game. But that's not to say, maybe it would change. If he ever were to become their starter, they'd probably have to go in a different direction from a scheme perspective. But I like the player, and I'm excited to see him develop there.
Yeah, and you kind of saw that a little bit last year after that bye week. Their offense kind of changed a little bit more, added a little bit more play action, a little bit more of a running base. They still took some shots down the field, but, is that something now? One of the questions that we've been kind of talking about back and forth. Was this draft pick for Bruce necessarily? Or was it maybe for Byron who takes over for Bruce? And would he fit the kind of offense that he might want to run, looking after what they did after that bye week?
It's tough to say, but I think you bring up a good point that if it ever comes to a point where, Tom is not there and it's Kyle, I don't know that Bruce is still there, with his age and his health and stuff. I have a hard time believing he stays past however long the Tom Brady era lasts in Tampa Bay, because he's already won, right? I mean, what's he going to stay for and build from the ground up again? He won already. So it's probably more of a Byron pick. I do think Leftwich is probably the guy that's going to take over for Bruce one day. And I imagine they got Byron's input right on the Kyle Trask pick. I imagine he probably gave his blessing on it. So it's tough to say right now, but I would agree that whenever the Tom era is done in Tampa, I imagine that the Bruce era is also done.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Byron and actually Byron and Clyde Christensen were both at his pro day that had discussions with him afterwards. So, your point too, had his hand in the evaluation. It sounds spot on. But the next pick in the third round at number 94 was, for me, it was tough because I saw Quinn Miners sitting there, and I fell in love with this kid. I had them taking him in my final mock in the second round because I didn't think he'd fall to the third round, but they surpassed him. He ends up going to the Broncos, which I think is a great landing spot for him. But they end up going with Robert Hainsey from Notre Dame, and we know the track record of some of these Notre Dame guys, Quentin Nelson, and Zach Martin, Mike McGlinchey. Obviously not as the same ilk as those type of players, but they do put out good, solid starters. What were your immediate thoughts when you saw that pick go to the Bucs, and talk about his flexibility and really how he showed out at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, and you bring up a good point with his alma mater there, and you mentioned a bunch of guys that were taken in previous years. How about this year alone? I mean, how many of them got drafted? Right, you had Liam Eichenberg there, you had Aaron Banks, so the three offensive linemen in this class alone. So it's a school that knows how to churn out offensive line talent. When I was watching Robert Hainsey for the first time several months ago, I remember writing a note next to his name, and it's a compliment. It may not sound like one, but I said, you know what? This is the kind of guy where it's tough to get excited about him, but you're going to look back in 7 years and say Robert Hainsey's still starting in the National Football League. Now, he reminds me of that kind of player where it's not exciting. It doesn't jump out at you. It doesn't pop off the screen. He's just a quality guy that gets the job done. And I wrote that note. I said, you're going to look back and regret not having a higher grade on him because he's going to start, and that's who he is. So I think we'll look back and be happy with that pick. Tampa will be happy with that pick. The versatility you talked about, can play inside, can play outside. I think I like him better playing inside personally at the next level. I don't know that he can play tackle in the NFL. I think he'll probably be a guard, but he can play both, right? And he's done it. So the Senior Bowl, he showed off that versatility. They had him working a little bit of both, and he quietly had a good week again, right? Wasn't a guy that everyone was talking about jumping for joy. You didn't see a lot of hype on him on Twitter and whatnot, but he had a good week, and he's quietly a good football player. And that's what I mean by that. He doesn't do anything to excite you. It's not fun to talk about Robert Hainsey and so on, but I think he's going to be a really quality football player.
Hey, I think that's great news. So I'm all set with that. As long as you can step in, you had the obvious hole with Jensen and potentially Jensen if they don't re-sign and restructure him, and obviously Kappa next year. Another guy they found out of a small school that turned into a really good starter. If that's the case, to develop him, slide him in. Hey, I'm all for that. But then they went with another head scratcher pick, and this was some controversy too, along with the Kyle Trask, just because people didn't like Kyle Trask and they didn't think they needed a quarterback. But Jalen Darden out of North Texas, guy can move. He's quick. He's shifty. He's small. But talk to us a little bit about him and his ability. I think a lot of people are expecting him to play some returner and some special teams. What have you seen out of him that he can do that while also being a contributor in the wide receiver room?
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about a guy that's really dynamic with the football in his hands and is super elusive. Jalen Darden is that guy. He wrote the record books there at North Texas. Everything he did, they couldn't stop him in that conference. Defenses had no answer for him. So it's a guy that was better than where he played, and he could have played at a bigger school. He chose to play at North Texas. He could have gone to a bigger program. He had a ton of offers. So undersized, obviously, not going to meet any of your thresholds from a size perspective, height, weight, length, any of those things. That's not who he is. But you watch what he does underneath when he gets the ball in his hands, and it's special. And he's got the speed to take the top off of defense. The deep ability is there. It's really exciting. And I like the landing spot there. I really do. I know you talked about it. Maybe some people thought it was a reach. But when I see the way Tampa loves to push the ball down the field, that vertical passing game, it's a guy it's a tough assignment, one-on-one. And if he goes deep, and if you're trying to play press man on him, at the line of scrimmage, if you miss or you're not precise, he's gone, right? That's the old saying we have. If he's even, he's leaving, right? So good luck with him at the line of scrimmage. And of course, if you do get your hands on him, he's not big enough or strong enough to recover, right? That's the caveat there is if the press man corner wins the rep, then he's going to win the rep. And that's the way it goes there. So, but a very elusive with the ball in his hands, deep speed. I'd love to see him play, even if they have a package for him, as a rookie, get the ball in his hands, let him run deep, let Tom throw it up to him, and he's tough to keep up with. In terms of the returner, I like that you brought that up because you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Tampa's special teams last year wasn't all that great. It was one area where they weren't very good. The return game wasn't very good. Kick return, punt returner. It's a guy that can come in and play that role for them on day one, especially as a punt returner, where I think he has the ability to be really good there.
Yeah, that's definitely somewhere where they struggled. Jaden Mickens did all right in their role. He missed some time with COVID injury. Then they had Kenjon Barner. They tried out a couple of the guys, but really they haven't had a lockdown guy. And one stat I found really particularly interesting about Darden is since 2019, he's had 26 touchdowns from the slot, which was 8 more than other player in college football. So a lot of these people see the speed and see, like a deep burner threat, but he's much more than that, isn't he?
Yeah, like I said, let him work underneath. He's elusive with the ball in his hands. You can manufacture for him. Get him out in the screen game, right? Do some things. Run jet sweeps. Let his speed win on the edge. There are things you can do with him. Like I said, when he wins underneath, the yards after catch ability is there. He's elusive. He's special, and he's really exciting. So I'm not surprised they took him where they had to. Speed wins, and it kills in today's game. Look where Tutu Atwell went. A lot earlier than some people were expecting, right? Based on the measurements. The Rams took him there in the second round, I believe it was. So you look at someone like Darden, I'm not shocked that Tampa had to take him where they took him. And like I said, he's a better football player than he gets credit for. He could have played at a bigger school, and the touchdowns that he had there at North is ridiculous. So good football player, and I really like the landing spot because of that ability, in that scheme. I think it makes a lot of sense.
And if you guys are just tuning in, we're here with Justin Melo of the Draft Network. Did amazing draft interviews with all these prospects. Well, not all of them, but 250 of them. So he was churning them out. Great content. Appreciate having him on here. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask him in the comment. We'll get them to him. But we're going to go from one guy who had a lot of speed to another guy who is kind of a throwback to some old school linebackers, a Ted Johnson type of thumper who's going to come in and lay the wood on you, a tone setter, but really is kind of losing their place in today's NFL with their 5th round pick in KJ Britt out of Auburn. Were you shocked about that pick with some of the other guys still on the board that had speed and flexibility? And then I do want to ask too, with the linebacker selection, Dylan Moses, how did he fall all the way out of the draft?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add on KJ Britt because you summed it up really nicely. He's a 2-down thumper. It's really an old school vibe you get from him when you watch the tape, and I guess there's still a spot for those guys. We saw the linebackers that went early, right? It's nowadays it's the Jamin Davis to Washington, right? It's the sideline to sideline ability, the range that teams look for, but that's not Britt, right? He's not long, or he's not dynamic. Certainly not a dynamic athlete. No one's going to describe him as that. So old school 2-down thumper. One thing I don't think we're talking enough about on him is I think he's going to be a really good special teams player. I think that may be where he has to cut his teeth. He reminds me of another linebacker out of the University of Auburn from several years ago, Darren Bates, who's made a career for himself in the NFL, mainly with the Tennessee Titans, also with the Oakland Raiders before them, as a special teams thumper, a special teams captain. So wouldn't shock me if KJ Britt has to be that kind of guy. 5th round is where I kind of expected him to go. He was so productive in college at Auburn, but you knew he wasn't going to go super early, right? Because the lack of the dynamic ability that we look for in today's game. He is a thumper, like you said. I don't think you're going to ever play him in pass coverage, and that's the caveat with him. That's something that you have to worry about. But I do think he'll be a pretty good special teams player, and he's a really good leader. That's another thing about him. He was the leader of that Auburn defense, super experienced. I think he'll come in, be a good teammate, and he'll give you something on special teams.
And we'll get into another one of these linebackers that they drafted as well in the 7th round. But before they did that, they grabbed Chris Wilcox out of BYU, 6'2", 4'3" speed. Guy kind of played a little bit all in the secondary, played some special teams too. I look at him probably as a gunner with that size. on special teams, and that's something that Bruce really talked about. Bruce Arians talked about with this day 3 is really getting guys who can, like as you said, cut their teeth on special teams. KJ Britt, Jalen Darden, Chris Wilcox, and the final pick that we'll get into in a minute are those type of guys. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. And I'll tell you what, it goes back to what I said about when you're the Super Bowl champions and you brought everybody back like they did. I mean, it's so rare, right, that you're able to re-sign everybody, but they did it. And hats off to them for being able to do so. And they got creative with the salary cap and backloaded a couple of those deals and voided years and all that. But when you're that good, right, and you're bringing everyone back, special teams, right, is the name of the game. That's where they can get better. And that's where a lot of these rookies are going to have to contribute. Look, they don't have room for a bunch of guys to come in. They don't have room for more than 2 of them, 1 of them even, for these rookies to come in and really give them a lot on offense and defense. It's going to have to be special teams, and that's where there's room on your roster. When you're this good, it's the back end of it. And what do you need the back end guys to do? You need them to play good on special teams. Right, so Wilcox come in, really intriguing, great size, like you said. I was going to bring that up. The measurements are through the roof. The height is terrific. The weight is terrific. Super long guy, which you look for, I think, in today's game is really important. You love to have those long corners, and ability to play special teams, like you touched on. One thing that he needs, he's been a little banged up throughout his time. He was hurt a little bit. And ball skills, no career interceptions to his name, and that's certainly a concern. He's going to have to turn that around as well. But you like it's a piece of clay, the weight, the length, the height. It's something that you want to try to mold, right? It's the things that you can't teach. Well, now you hope you can get in there. You hope you can keep them healthy. You hope you can mold them, improve those ball skills, teach them a thing or two there, and you hope that he can play special teams for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing, I was kind of curious. I was, trying to look at some tape and see if the ball skills you mentioned were lack of, teams not going his way or him just not being able to come down. And it looked like it was a little bit of both, when he was healthy. So that's something to definitely monitor. And the last pick, Mr. Irrelevant. I hate that name because this guy could possibly be anything but, and certainly in his own personal life has been nothing but irrelevant. A real hero, a real champion for his family and for a great cause with the Heels to Halos, that charity that he started and he's founding. If you guys don't know about Heels to Halo, definitely go on their website, check it out, and donate if you can. It's definitely a powerful charity. But Grant Stewart out of Houston, this guy plays with his hair on fire, and it makes sense because his hair is literally one of the biggest things about him, other than his personality and his character. Talk to me about Grant Stewart.
Terrific head of hair. I mean, you said it first and foremost. Well, it's terrific. But no, you're right. A champion, a really terrific guy, a great story, just a terrific human being. And again, you feel like you're reading my mind. You picked exactly what I was going to say. Plays with his hair on fire. I mean, this guy's got one speed. Right, he's always going. He goes from 0 to 100, and he keeps it there the whole time. He's always at 100. You love the effort. You love the motor. I hate to keep using the term special teams, but I think this guy's going to be a really good special teams player, a really good one, a captain in this league. And I think that's what they're going to get out of him. And I think they know what they're getting. He's certainly not guaranteed a roster spot, being the pick where he was chosen. But he's got to come in, play special teams, and I think he's going to embrace it. And I think he loves it. I think he's excited to do it. So I expect him to make the team, and I expect him to be a hell of a special teams player.
Now, that's the question here, because they just brought Joe Jones in from the Denver Broncos, who was a special teams player over there, 26 special teams tackles over the last 4 years, led that team during that span. And also, we talked about KJ Britt as well, inside linebacker. They already have Kevin Minter, who was a special teams captain last year for the club, and obviously, LVD and Devin White. But out of those 3 players, we're talking Jones, Stewart, and Britt. Which one do you think makes the roster? Because I don't see them keeping 5 linebackers. It's a possibility looking at the current roster where it is. I'm debating on that 5th outside linebacker, 5th inside linebacker, if they want to keep those with about 7 defensive linemen. But where do you see these guys potentially? Who makes the roster if it comes down to just one of them?
That's really tough. I'll tell you what, Jones is going to have obviously the upper hand being a veteran, right, and having played in this league. So you certainly feel like you got to give the upper hand to him. But if there's an opportunity there where they can cut some salary, save a couple bucks, and you feel you get the same thing on special teams that you out of Britt or Mr. Irrelevant, as you called them, then I think that's a decision you have to think long and hard of. But if I was a betting man and I had to put my money down on that, and there's only one of them, I'm going to go with the veteran every single time.
Now, what if they decide to keep 2? Is it Britt or is it Stewart? Because that's what I'm debating on right now.
That's tough. Britt probably gives you a bit more as a football player. With the experience at Auburn, he's slight upper hand, maybe being a fifth-round pick versus being a seventh. The experience, the leadership there. I lean towards Britt, but I don't think that's an easy question to answer because I think Stewart is going to be the better special teams player. And if it comes down to that and that only, then he's got a chance to beat out Britt.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking at currently with my projections. Way too early, 53 roster projections. I have another question for you, and then actually we have a question from the crowd. From Christopher Cole, he goes, "What's your take on next year's quarterback class? What could the Buccaneers have waited next year and potentially got a better prospect, even at the end of the first round? If they, let's say from the 20s on, seeing their playoff team." Could they have gotten potentially a better prospect than Kyle Trask if they had waited a year?
Yeah, that's tough to answer, and I'll tell you why. And it's probably not the popular answer, so to speak. But I mean, remember this time 2 years ago, who was talking about Joe Burrow? Where did we have Joe Burrow going?
Thank you.
Right, where did we have Joe Burrow going in mock drafts 2 years ago? 6th round, 7th round. So it's always possible that somebody can emerge. I think it's impossible to answer that question for Tampa. That could they have gotten someone better? I mean, we don't know yet. It's far too early to say that. I'll say right now, the way the class is shaping up, it doesn't overly excite me. I think Sam Howell's the guy that can do some things and might take that leap forward and could be the guy in next year's class. I think the kid from USC intrigues me as well. And of course, we got the guy in Cincinnati as well, right? Desmond Ridder. So I think those three guys all have a chance to take a step forward and really prove themselves to be a big-time prospect. But as of right now, I don't love the class as things stand right now.
The last question, I'll get you out of here, and I pretty much think I know your answer because it's my answer too. But we'll go with that, and then besides him, I want to know. So the Bucs signed 9 undrafted free agents. Wide receiver T.J. Simmons out of West Virginia, kicker Jose Borregales out of Miami. He was the top kicker in the nation. Cornerback Cameron Kinley out of Navy. Tackle Calvin Ashley out of FAMU. Safety Lawrence White out of Ohio State. Defensive lineman Elijah Ponder out of Cincy. Outside linebacker Leighton McCarthy out of Florida Atlantic University. Safety Augie Contressa out of Stony Brook. And the guy who I think probably has the best shot, offensive lineman Sedarius Hutchinson out of South Carolina. What are your thoughts on the undrafted free agent class? If you look at the Buccaneers roster now, I believe they have 14 to 15 undrafted players on their roster, whether either they brought them in or they came in through elsewhere. And I believe they have 5 of them who are actually really key contributors on the roster. So you can always find gems in the undrafted. These guys, chip on their shoulder, they work hard. And sometimes you get the guys who fit your system better than you thought they would. So who's the guy that you think has the best chance to make this roster?
Yeah, I'll agree. I'll probably agree with your choice there, Sedarius Hutchinson. I had a draftable grade on him. He's really tough. He's physical, a lot of grit. And personally, I find Tampa, the way they scout offensive linemen, at least in recent years, I find that they've always put a bit more emphasis on tough, smart, and nasty than they do on just terrific athletes like some other teams do. I mean, and it shows. Look at the Robert Hainsey pick, right? A guy that I talked about who doesn't really excite you from an athletic perspective, but is really smart and is nasty. And I think Sedarius Hutchinson is kind of that in a similar mold. So I think he's got a great chance. A couple other guys I say don't sleep on will be Lawrence White, the safety out of Iowa State. I got to interview him before the draft. He put up some good numbers at Iowa State, some really eye-popping numbers that I don't think got enough attention. And then also, I believe you said they signed Calvin Ashley, right, out of FAMU?
Yes, sir.
It's another guy that intrigues me a little bit as a swing tackle. I think can be a versatile guy and play some positions for you there on the O-line. But I would say Sedarius has the best chance, but don't sleep on Lawrence White and Calvin Ashley.
And I thought it was interesting they brought in Jose Borregales in from Miami. They just re-signed Ryan Succop to a 3-year deal. But I haven't heard, and I don't know if you have, but I haven't heard any news on the practice squad situation. Last year, we saw the fact that you could, protect 4 players a week. You could have, as extended practice squad. I think there are 12 players instead of the usual 8 or 10. And then also you could have veterans on it. I've tried to look it up. I haven't found it if they're going to stick with that because I know coaches absolutely love that. And with COVID, the risk is still there. Even if you're vaccinated, you can still catch the disease. Have you heard anything about that? And is that potentially why they might have drafted him? Signed him as an undrafted free agent to kind of keep him on as that kicker, like they did Greg Joseph all year.
I haven't heard anything on that front yet, but I will agree that if that's the case, if we're going to keep that rule in place for the 2021 season, then you can bet your butt they're going to do that with that FSU kicker, because teams last year, they were hoarding kickers and punters, right? I mean, it's one of those positions where if your guy goes down, you only got one of them, right? Even if he went down with COVID, that was last year, he's the only one that can do it, right, on the team. So if they're allowed to do so, they're going to keep that kicker out of FSU. He was certainly one of the best kickers in the draft, one of the top 3. I had him right up there with Evan McPherson out of Florida and with Jake Verity out of Eastern Carolina. So if that rule comes into play, then I certainly imagine that they're going to keep him around. He was a really good kicker at FSU. And if they didn't just sign Suckup to a brand new deal, and I don't know what the guaranteed money situation is there on Suckup, but if that wasn't the case, if they can get out of that deal, somewhat easily, it wouldn't shock me. If the FSU kid has a great camp and has a great preseason, this guy was a really good kicker in college. So, I would leave a little room for the possibility that there's a bit of a surprise coming there.
And my last question before I get you out of here. Give this Buccaneers draft a grade. How did you think it turned out? What would you give it a grade with Tryon, Trask, Hainsey, Darden, Britt, Wilcox, and Stewart?
Yeah, if I got to apply a letter grade, I'd probably go with an even B. I think it was good, maybe not great, but I really like Joe Tryon there in the first round. I think Trask, I think they had to take a quarterback to try to groom. I think Trask makes a little sense there, especially from a personality perspective. I like Darden and the fit there. Maybe they could have got better value on Britt. Like you said, there were some other linebackers on the board there that had some more athletic ability. Wilcox, Stewart late. I mean, they're day 3 picks. They're dart throws. Truthfully, that's what most day 3 picks are. But there's some special teams ability there with those guys. And Wilcox, you might be able to mold into something because you love the traits, you love the intangibles. I would say a B. I like the draft. There's some other classes that I liked better, but I would say that Tampa did a really good job. And looking at Hainsey as well, I didn't even touch on him. I think he's going to be a quality player. Darden makes sense in that offense and is a fun guy. So I'll go with an even B. It's a good class.
Yeah, that's about where I had them, with an even B plus, maybe, if I felt good about it. But when you really looked at it, those first 3 to 4 picks were, guys who could help. If Godwin leaves, if AB leaves, guys who could help in the future. And the last 3 picks you had were dart throw special teams guys. These guys are going to be, that's it. They're going to be your special teamers. So with that being said, Justin, I want to thank you so much for coming on again. We had a great time talking to you before the draft. We had a wide variety of prospects we broke down, kept you here a little bit longer. This time we had just the Buccaneers draft and undrafted free agents. Still kept you a little bit longer. I apologize, but man, I'm going to tap into that knowledge all I can. I've talked to you, about different things, and can't wait to continue to talk about you, especially when the season starts up. And we'll definitely have to talk more often, have you on the show again. But I want to thank you a lot for coming on here and doing this for me.
The pleasure was all mine, Josh. You guys have a great night.
Thank you. So there you guys have it. Justin Melo of the Draft Network. We had Zach Goodall of SI Bucks. Now we have Justin Melo. Now it's time for you guys. Now it's your turn. I want to hear from you guys. I'm going to drop the invite button right here in here on camera, or stay off camera, and come on audio and come up and talk to me. But we're going to dive right into the 4-point stance. We're already running a little late, but you know what? You have good content. We got to keep that good content going. I'm all here for the content for you guys. So let's jump into the 4-point stance. I'm going to take your questions off Twitter, off here, off Facebook, wherever you submitted them, and I'll give you my hard stance on them. So our first couple of questions come from Twitter, and we have Leroy Williams. That's what camp body running backs are we getting in? This is an interesting situation, right? So we talked about how the roster right now is at 85 of 90%. They have Ronald Jones, who got banged up a little bit last year. Leonard Fournette, who got banged up a little bit last year. They have Giovanni Bernard, who's been pretty healthy over his career, but is still an older player. And then you also have Keyshawn Vaughn and CJ Precise. I definitely think they bring another running back in, and I think they start with this rookie minicamp, whether it's an undrafted free agent, whether they sign a first-year or second-year player to come in and contribute in this, because as of right now, they got Keyshawn Vaughn and they have CJ Precise. I'm not sure if either of those guys will be in the rookie minicamp, and when you bring in a quarterback, obviously you want to see the guy handing the ball off. You want to see the guy, throwing quick screens out to the running back and different things like that. So they don't have a rookie running back. They didn't sign one as an undrafted free agent. They obviously didn't draft one. So I can definitely see them bringing someone in as a tryout player. As for a specific name to bring in as a running back, I mean, you definitely want to keep bodies fresh, right? We're going for 17 games this year, and we all pretty much agree that the Buccaneers are going to be in the playoffs. So you want to keep these guys fresh. You want to run them down in camp too hard. You want to make sure they're in football shape, ready to go, but you want to make sure they stay fresh. And that's why you have Leonard Fournette and why you have Rojo, because you have two, type A backs that can split carries and really, keep each other healthy and fresh throughout the season. That's what you hope. So definitely think they're bringing it back. I definitely think, you heard Bruce Arians say he thinks Keyshawn Vaughn's going to have a big breakout year potentially this year. And I can still see it. You're going to see these running backs worked in and out. The goal is keep everyone healthy, keep everyone fresh. Linemen are going to play over their lineman roles. Defense are going to quarterbacks are going to play his quarterback roles. But as for wide receivers and running backs, these guys are going to get rotated constantly. Make sure they're fresh. Keep their legs fresh, especially the running back position, because when it comes to December, January, and now February, because it's an extra week, you want to keep those legs fresh on those running backs. So definitely think there's a running back that comes in. DC the Dom, my man, he said, we talked about it, but do we think Trask is a solid backup, or do we stick with Blaine as the backup? I think Blaine's the guy. I mean, not too long ago, about a week, 3-4 weeks ago, we had Jason Light in a press conference saying, Blaine Gabbert could be the future at quarterback. He was talking about, Blaine Gabbert is a succession plan, could be the succession plan. And, well, I think everyone kind of thought that was, a crock of baloney. I think they really like him. He's a veteran. I know Bruce likes him a lot. He knows the system to a T, and he'll be a great mentor. Now, what this means is probably Ryan Griffin, if those practice squad rules aren't reinforced. We were just talking about it with Justin Melo, the practice squad rules where you can keep veterans on them, keep up to 12 players on them. That's something that we can look at there and say, okay, well, he's probably gone. Or he can stick around the practice squad. But the writing on the wall is definitely for Griff. I don't think they trust the rookie right away. But you never know how preseason goes. The Patriots did it with Tom Brady multiple times, with Jimmy G and Jared Stidham. And if you feel comfortable enough with Kyle Trask, what you see out of training camp, preseason, OTAs, and all these things, then that opens up another roster spot to keep another player. So definitely a possibility. But with a contract that gave Gabbert $2 million for 1 year with his incentives to get another $500,000, I think he's firmly locked on this roster, and Griff's got to go. DC the Don with another one. Have we heard anyone else wanting to get their old college numbers besides Lenny? I have not. I know some of the rookies are going to be wearing. I know Joe Tryon's wearing number 9. I know Jalen Darden's wearing number 1. Kyle Trask is going to 2 instead of 11 because that's what Blaine Gabbert has. So I know there are some of these rookies that are going to try to get their college numbers. Also, some of these undrafted guys are going to grab their college numbers if they're available. We'll see. Obviously, anyone on the main roster is going to get their first crack at these numbers over the rookies. But we'll see if anyone wants to switch their numbers up. It's Tom Brady isn't a big fan of it. It's going to be interesting to see, number 7s and number 9s and, 21s lining up as a linebacker / defensive end. The defensive line can't wear that. But if you have a guy who pretty much plays with his hand in the dirt half the time, but is technically a linebacker, that's going to be interesting to see. And also another thing it does is if these guys decide, so Joe Tryon's wearing number 9, right? If he plays his hand in the dirt a majority of the time, he can't go, if it comes to a franchise tag, he can't go and say, hey, I'm not a linebacker, I'm a defensive end. Well, you're wearing a linebacker's number, so that squashes that completely. It's kind of a smart little thing they did. And DC the Don's got one more. He says, last one, am I the only one excited for KJ Britt and Mr. North Texas, Jalen Darden, more than anyone else? I like Jalen Darden. I'm excited about Jalen Darden. I think his prospects are pretty good. They can use him a variety of ways, hopefully as a good returner, good gunner. He's got great speed, shiftiness. I read the stat. He's got 29 touchdowns out of the slot since 2019. And, it leads it leads NCAA, the entire country, by 8 touchdowns. So he did a lot of work out of there. He's not just a guy who, is a burner, set him up like Scotty Miller, set him up and have him go. He's got a lot of looseness. Obviously still a little bit raw, route running, stuff like that. He's a small guy, but, I like his ability, and I think he's going to be a good player for this Buccaneers team. We'll go on to some of these comments on here. in the chat over here. I want to thank you guys for participating for sure. If you could give Tom Brady one piece of advice before the season starts, what would it be? What would I mean, what do you give a guy for an advice that has, everything down? Let loose a little bit, have a beer or something like that. I don't know. I mean, the guy's been doing it for 43 years. I think he knows the best thing to do. Maybe be my friend. Come hang out with me. We got Siobhan over here. Taysom Hill going to win that division? Yeah, probably not. Taysom Hill might not even win that starting quarterback job. Do you see the Don says who? Who? I don't know who. I don't know what that was in response to. Let me know down the line. What else do we have here? So yeah, stay healthy. That's great. That is great advice for him for sure. The Bucs can go undefeated this year. I think they could. We talked about the schedule, and I've got a few more other things to finish on the kickoff that we didn't get to before we wrap the show up. We talked about the schedule, and the schedule release is coming out. The Bucs have the easiest schedule based on current rosters, easiest schedule in the NFL. Based on strength of schedule, which the NFL and ESPN rates or whatever, they still have the fourth easiest base of strength of schedule. They're playing the NFC East, they're playing the AFC East, and while the Patriots and the Dolphins and the Bills, I think all got better, I just think this Bucs team got better too. It's going to be interesting to see, how it all plays out, who they're starting the season against. But yeah, I think they could probably go undefeated for sure. But kind of jumping into a little bit of this, and then we'll wrap it up because we're right up against the clock. I talked to you guys about rookie minicamp, May 14th to May 15th. OTAs will start May 25th to 27th, June 1st to 3rd, and then June 15th to 17th with mandatory minicamp packed right in between there, June 7th to 9th. So remember, OTAs are optional rookie minicamp. I think all the rookies are going to be there, even though those are optional too. The mandatory minicamps, those are things that these players have to go to. They're mandatory. So that will take place from June 7th to June 9th. So we're going to get a first look at these guys next Saturday. I'll be there, hopefully, to give you guys some pictures, some video, and some live look at these rookies, tossing the ball and making plays on offense and defense. But the schedule release comes out next Wednesday. Excited for that, to see where we're going to find out who these teams are going to play in what order. We know the opponents. Who are they going to play? What order, what week, who they're going to open up against, who are the preseason guys going to be. So we'll get all that. A couple other new little nuggets to add to. The Bucs added Thaddeus Lewis, who was an assistant last year on the coaching staff. They added him to assistant wide receiver. Fills the spot that Antoine Randall had when he left to go to the Detroit Lions. So a good addition there. DC, I see what you're saying. A.Q. Shipley, who obviously we know was a center who was signed last year, had a career-ending injury. He's now on the coaching staff as an offensive assistant. Good to have that knowledge on there. The guy's been around the league for a while, knows Bruce Arians' system, can hopefully help some of these young guys. We talked about a Hainsey, we talked about a Hutchinson, we talked about all these other guys who are kind of trying to be centers, John Molchin, where they don't really have a true center that I think is capable of making the team on the roster. They do have Donald Stanley, but I think he's probably a guy who's a roster who gets cut at roster time. But great additions to an already loaded coaching staff, one of the largest in the league, one of the most diverse in the league, and one of the most player orientated. It's like I compare it to if you're in school, right, and you have one teacher for 30 kids, or you have one teacher for 5 kids, and everyone likes to make fun of how big the staff is. But the more individual attention, I mean, the kicker's got its own coach. The more individual attention you can give these units and these players, the better, the quicker, the faster they're going to learn. It's just like kids in school. So I think it's great that the Glazers allow them to have such a big coaching staff, and obviously one of the most diverse coaching staffs in the league. Whether it be minorities, females, they do a great job. NFL.com put their power rankings out, and the Buccaneers are Number one. Why wouldn't they be? I mean, they just won the Super Bowl, brought everybody back, had a great draft. They have the Kansas City Chiefs at number 2. They have the Buffalo Bills at number 3. They have the Green Bay Packers at number 4. And the real head scratcher here for me is they have the Baltimore Ravens at number 5. I think that's a little high for them. I liked what they did in the draft. I think they got a little bit worse on the offensive line, which they're getting Ronnie Staley back, but they lost their starting center. They lost their tackle. They replaced him with Andrew Villanueva from the Steelers, but I still think there was a downgrade there. They didn't really get better on the offensive line. The wide receivers we'll have to see. They grabbed 2 guys that I really liked with Bateman and Tylan Wallace. So we'll see, we'll see how that plays out for sure. But it's definitely going to be interesting. And then one last tidbit before we wrap up and get out of here, and I want to thank you guys for hanging around. Casey Rogers, congratulations to him. He was named the Defensive Line Coach of the Year. The John, I'm going to push this name, Telenik, Defensive Coach of the Year, voted on by his peers. So, all the defensive line coaches, they vote for who they think the best one was. And bada bing, bada boom, won't you know it, Casey Rogers got it. And for good reason, too. The guy had the number 1 rush defense 2 years in a row. Those defensive linemen that we have, going, Vita Vea goes down. You use Nacho, you use Steve McClendon, and you still don't miss a beat. You still finish with the top rush defense in the league. You got to give the guy credit. Hats off to him. But I really love what this team has done, what they've built, the players they brought in, the fact that the team is all bought in as a whole. And I think we're going to continue to see that momentum roll into next season. And it's going to start right out the gate May 14th in rookie minicamp. So with that being said, guys, I want to thank you so much. Bring this to the overtime drive. I'm going to just wrap up the show, wrap up my thoughts. I want to thank some of our guys who we had on here. Obviously, Jacob Charnow, the prodigy. But big shout out to Zach Goodall of SI Bucs for coming on here, talking a little bit of draft, talking a little bit of Bucs. So that was great to have him in here. We'll definitely have him back on again. Can't wait for normalcy to open up so I can, kind of meet him in person. Seen him in the Zoom conferences all the time, but it's nice to have him on the show. Obviously, a huge shout out to Justin Melo from the Draft Network. He also covers the Tennessee Titans, so if you want to learn anything about the Tennessee Titans, go follow him. Guy interviewed over 250 draft prospects, came on, broke down the entire draft, not just the entire draft, but also the undrafted free agents. So if you missed that, go back and watch that. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's done his research. Not only that, but he's also talked to most of these prospects firsthand. So he knows a little bit about the player as a human and as a person more than just as a player on the field. So I want to thank him. My main thought of the show is the Bucs just keep getting better, and whether it's through them bringing guys in, bringing their own guys back through the draft, or just these under the radar signings, a linebacker in Joe Jones, who hopefully might be on the show soon. Stay tuned for that. A safety like Raven Green, a linebacker like Ladarius Hamilton, a cornerback like Nate Brooks, guys who can come in and compete for those final roster spots, but also compete and try to make this special teams unit better, because we know how good the defense was. We know how good the offense was. One of the spots that could get better is special teams. And, after they've brought everyone back and have both units complete, you can really see them starting to hammer home on this special teams unit to make sure that A, it improves, and B, it's one of the best in the league. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think we're going to see a lot of that in training camp, a lot of special teams work where we're looking at these guys and say, okay, who's going to fill up this roster? Because, like I've said, and I've said it before, the spots on this roster are very limited. You're looking at 5th cornerback. You're looking at 4th, maybe 5th inside linebacker, 4th, maybe 5th outside linebacker. And that's if you're not sold on Anthony Nelson. I think I am. The defensive line is set. I would be surprised to see them bring any other defensive lineman in unless it's going to be a clear upgrade over a guy like Steve McClendon, who's on a rookie deal. I mean, not a rookie deal, a veteran minimum deal, or a guy like Pat O'Connor. Or maybe even Khalil Davis, who's on year 2 of his rookie deal. Offensive lineman, maybe a guy who can play true center. Maybe that's someone you look. Maybe a veteran like a Daniel Kilgore, who was with the Chiefs last year. Other than that, I don't think you're really looking at anything on the offensive line. Maybe a running back, as we talked. Maybe they want to bring another running back, keep a running back in instead of a 6th wide receiver, which I doubt, because you drafted Jalen Darden and you're not cutting Scotty. You're probably not cutting Tyler Johnson. So that's already wrapped up. So there's really nowhere for these guys to make impact. And I think that's why you saw these signings on special teams with the Raven Green, with the Joe Jonas, with the Nate Brooks. more competition for those 3 spots: safety, linebacker, and cornerback, where there's the real only positions that, people are fighting for on this team. I think everything else is locked up. Backup center, it's the only other spot. I just can't see it. But with that said, those are my final thoughts. I want to thank all of you guys for being here. Again, big shout out to my guests. Thanks to you guys. Thanks for making the right call with the Audible every Thursday night here on Bucs Report. We'll be back next Thursday. Hopefully we'll have another special guest on, maybe a current player. We'll see, working on some strings. So we'll see what happens there. I don't want to promise anything, but that's what we're doing. We're trying to work on getting you guys some more current players on here to, give you that access to these guys and be able to, in the comments, come up on stage, ask these guys questions. So that's what I'm trying to work on here for you guys. Always trying to give you the best content I can. But I want to thank you all again for another great show. I'll see you next Thursday. Tune right here into Bucs Report every Thursday, 8:30 for the Audible. Thank you guys. And hey, have a wonderful night. I'll talk to you soon.
We them Bucs, and we taking over. 31 teams, best look over your shoulder. We them Bucs. It's our time to shine, they ain't never gonna stop, and we on the grind, and we the Bucs. Our team is louder, putting fear up in the league, and they fold and cower. We the Bucs, and we winning it all. The ship is in our backyard, and this year is ours.